I'm Will Aubrey. Time for another edition of the Improbability Engine. My buddy Joe Darnell is alongside me. And Joe, let's start as always with our moment of what?
Kick it off. I'm ready to see what you got.
All right. I always, when I take a shower, I play my MP3 player. It's actually an old phone, but since all I use it for is to play MP3s, it's an MP3 player.
Is it waterproof?
So anyway, I'm playing it, and the song playing is Hey Carrie Ann. And I'm not going to attempt to sing it.
But anyway, hum a couple bars so we know what's going on.
You know, sometimes you hear songs from like the 70s and the lyrics you notice for the first time and you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. So it goes, Hey Carrie Ann, what's your game now? Can anybody play?
Yeah.
Hey Carrie Ann, what's your game now? Can anybody play? And then, you're so like a woman to me. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, rather than celery?
Is woman like what you're looking for, or is woman what you're looking for? I'm curious.
It just doesn't make any sense. You know, he could have said, you're so cool, you're so amazing, you're so awesome, you're so beautiful. He could have said a lot of things, but no, it's you're so like a woman to me. So clearly she's not.
But there are similarities.
Yeah.
I think that actually harkens to something I saw Conan O'Brien do. He was talking about how theme songs for television shows in the 80s could derail really quickly, and he gave Charles in Charge as an example. Charles in Charge. Charles in charge of our days and our nights. Charles in charge of our wrongs and our rights. As if he's some sort of founding father who's, leading them through the despotism of teenagers in suburbia. It kind of goes off the rails pretty quick. My moment of what is probably going to lead right into our first discussion point, so I'm going to go ahead and say it now. My moment of what, last night, Murray State fell on the road in Johnson Arena to Morehead State, 1 point in overtime. And on Twitter, there were people asking about the job security of Coach Matt McMahon. And all I could do was sit back and go, what? Because that to me is completely asinine. There is no reason to even ask the question. The guy's been here for less than 2 years as a head coach, and I contest he's had to rebuild an entire roster from when he took over. Is it any surprise that he hasn't had 25 win seasons where he's challenging Belmont for the title in his year and a half since he took the job? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, initially I would agree with you, but perhaps not for the reason that you would expect.
Okay, I'm curious now.
Murray State can't afford to buy his contract out. And so he's going to be here 4 years no matter what. So he has job security. And for anybody to suggest that he's going to be dismissed or that there's a chance he could be dismissed in his second year, they are just being completely unrealistic. So it doesn't even really pay to talk about that, since there's no way that's going to happen. For people to get upset one way or the other about it, people just need to get a grip. Now, additionally, I would say that it's probably almost always a bad idea to fire a coach in his second year. Unless, there's a scandal of some kind. And certainly
punches a player or something of that nature. Yeah, I think you're absolutely
certainly
right.
That hasn't been the case here. I think every coach pretty much deserves 4 years. I know when Billy Kennedy took over, there were people who were upset. I mean, the Racers went 16-14 their first year. They lost to a Division II team. And I said, well, if he doesn't get us to the NCAA tournament in 4 years, he'll be gone. And, he got us to the NCAA tournament.
Not only got us to the NCAA tournament, got us to the second round of the NCAA.
Absolutely.
Which is an accomplishment.
And really, that might be the best team the Racers have ever had.
It might not be the best, but by God, it's one of the best. It's got to be it's in the breath of some of the great teams from the 1940s and 50s. Those teams that went into the NAIB tournament and finished runner-up or in the Final Four, so on and so forth. I think you're talking about basketball in two different eras, so it's really hard to compare, but you're absolutely right in that was one of the best teams that Murray State's ever had. I look at this, people seem to forget, there's a lot of talk about, oh, well, Matt McMahon was on the staff. Matt McMahon was a recruiting coordinator. Matt McMahon recruited some of these guys. He did. And I'm not going to take anything away from him. And honestly, his record as an individual recruiter might not be great. But I'm here to tell you right now, whenever he took the job at Murray State, he was not taking a typical Murray State job. And he certainly didn't inherit a team the likes of which Steve Prohm inherited whenever he got his first year on the job at Murray State. I mean, you're looking at a team that had lost a head coach. Okay, fine. New head coach coming in, unto itself, that's not terrible. But they lost TJ Sapp. They lost Jarvis Williams. They lost Jonathan Farrell. Oh, and by the way, they lost Cameron Payne, who was a lottery pick in his sophomore year. So looking at the roster, if he has Cameron Payne for 2 more years, let's just kind of embellish on that thought, because there was no reason for Cameron Payne to stay at Murray State after his sophomore year. You get a lottery guarantee, bye. Because that's what you want to have. I mean, that's what you got to have. But if he has that, all of a sudden the pressure to perform on Matt McMahon goes down a lot. And you look at the comparison to Steve Prohm when his first year was in, and he had Isaiah Cannon,
who had not been a starter
been a starter the previous year, but had averaged double-digit scoring and had shown a propensity to take over games. And whenever his junior year came along, guess what? He took over games. You know, he was a leading scorer. He was the best player in the league. And I don't care what they say, he was the OVC Player of the Year. And I'm not trying to take anything away from the kid from Belmont. He had a great year. But when you compare them 1-to-1, there's no comparison. It was Isaiah Cannon's year that year.
Isaiah had a fabulous year that year, and one of the best years any Murray State player's ever had.
Obviously, yeah.
I remember Southeast Missouri coming over playing the Racers, and I think the kid's name was Corey Wilford. In the post-game interviews, talking about trying to guard Isaiah, and he said, "I thought I did a pretty good job in the first half, but then the second half he started pulling from half court. What was I supposed to do about that?"
Exactly.
And Isaiah just had a magical year where he could pull up and take a 30-footer. He believed it was going in, and very often it did. And so that was a magical year for Murray State fans. And it may never be equaled.
Right. And that's a real thing. So it comes back down now to looking at what Matt McMahon has done in his 1.5 years at Murray State. So you start with asking some questions. The first question I'd ask is, how many NBA players are on the roster whenever he took over?
When he took over,
how many NBA players are on the roster? Zero. He's had 1 recruiting year. He's added some talent and some size. They're still young. They still haven't quite gotten it to where they need to be. But I see some guys who could be role players plus on the roster right now in the young guys. What I don't see is right now an NBA player.
Well, I think that you could make arguments for Jonathan Stark and Terrell Miller.
Jonathan Stark, probably the closest guy you got. Terrell Miller's an interesting case. I think the NBA game, I think 10 years ago, Terrell Miller's absolutely an NBA player, and I think probably Jonathan Stark isn't, because of the way the NBA plays now versus 10 years ago. So to me, the big question comes in, what has he done to rebuild a roster that lost guys? Now, if you want to give him all the blame for guys transferring, fine. You can give him all the blame for Chad Culbreth, who, while he showed D1 talent, couldn't stay healthy. Got concussions in practice, and you know what? You just can't have. You only get 13 scholarship spots. You can't have a guy be that kind of guy. You got to have somebody who can play. You can blame him for Rambo. Although, honestly, Tyler Rambo stays at Murray State, I wonder how much better the team would have been last year, because that was a team that needed one more post player Didn't even matter what kind of post player, somebody who knew the game. And Rambo showed at different points in his career that he at least knew what was going on. But instead, he decided to go and play immediately at Indianapolis. Play for a nationally ranked team at a lower level. Okay. A.J. Patty. Now, A.J. Patty, I watched him play. He had Division I talent in the right system. It was not this system. And he moved on to the Division II team, one of the top Division II teams in the country, in Minnesota State Mankato. So if you want to blame him for all that, that's fine. That's fine. That's three guys. That hurts. Kedrick Flomo has a heart condition, can't play anymore. I can't blame him for that. Kedrick Flomo was absolutely a D1 player. This is a guy who averaged.
We don't know. To be fair, you don't know.
From all indications, he's the kind of guy you put a flyer on. You say, yeah, 6'1", maybe a little tall for, he might not be 6'1", he's probably 6 foot, but showed a propensity to be a scorer, a two-guard even, a small, undersized two-guard who could handle the ball a little bit in high school, averaged 35 points a game in high school. I mean, and in a pretty good area in North Carolina that puts out some serious talent, maybe not size, but guard-wise.
Is he playing anywhere now, by the way?
He tried and could never get clearance.
Okay.
He went back to North Carolina and went to a JUCO for I think 6 months trying to get clearance to play again near his home and was unable to do so. And so now he's focusing on his education. And frankly, I'm really happy for him that he found out the way he did.
Okay.
Because comparatively speaking, that was the best way to find out.
True.
So then you look at what he's had to do since then. Even if you give him all the blame for those guys, you look at what has come in. It was under his recruiting that Terrell Miller showed up. Now, you can say that he didn't directly recruit him. That's fine. That doesn't matter.
True.
John Stark's on the team. Now, John Stark kind of rely that back and say, well, part of that's because of Cameron Payne. Well, it doesn't really matter. Because that's what you want as a point guard who has a reason to come to Murray State. You got it. Now, Bryce Jones wavered on his commitment early on. After the coaching change, that happens. Recruits go, hey, this is, do I go or do I not go? And I tip my cap to Steve Prohm, and for as part of the last things he was doing before he left, he said, hey, look, stick with Murray State. This is a great school. This is a great opportunity and a great fit. And Bryce Jones is here, and he's a starter. And you can argue about his effectiveness and so on and so forth, but let's face it, he's a true point guard having to play the two because there's just not a lot of depth in the roster.
And anybody who looks at it fairly would have to say he's the third best player on the team.
He is. Now, the problem comes in that in the year and a half since Matt McMahon has taken over the job at Murray State, he started being down 4 professional players. 3 of them were seniors. One was a lottery pick in the NBA. He lost Moss and Langston to graduation. Now, those weren't his guys, but you can't tell me that there were any 2 players that you'd rather see on the floor for Murray State at any given point that were coming to the door, recruiting-wise. You weren't going to go and get somebody who was better than Langston his senior year. Wayne Langston absolutely carried the team in the post. He was fantastic. Now, did we need another post player? Yeah, we needed another post player. Jeffrey Moss, his stats took a step down, but a lot of that was because he didn't have an NBA caliber point guard throwing him the ball. That happens. You know what I mean? When the talent is depleted, the team doesn't get better. The individual pieces actually regress. That's part of that synergistic part of having a team. So this year we're looking at a team that is all inexperienced players. I don't care how you slice it. You can look at the average time spent at Murray State playing Division I basketball. Playing Division I basketball at Murray State is less than half a year for the roster. That's how young this team is. I'm not saying that there aren't teams that are as young and that are having, more success or less success, but I can tell you there's an analog out there that you can look at if people really want to compare it. And it's right over in Bowling Green, and it's Rick Stansberry. Now, I don't like the Hilltoppers. Never have, never will. Just something I can say to myself. But let's look at what Rick Stansberry, who is an SEC Coach of the Year, he can absolutely coach basketball and is considered one of the top recruiters in the country. He had worked with Billy Kennedy at A&M, brought in top 10 recruiting classes there. He's got commitments from top 5 recruits going to Western. Pfft, that didn't happen. And I'll be surprised if they show up, to be really honest with you, but that's not the point. He's had 1 year at Western. His roster is much older, much older. He has guys who are starting that he's got 5th-year transfer guys and Pancake Thomas come in. These are good, talented players. His record is 500. And why is that? Because it takes time to build a good team. It takes time at every level. I said it on Twitter the other day. We can criticize Coach McMahon for a lot of things. You can look at individual play calling and you can look at how they focus on practices, although I don't know why you would, because we're not there. I don't know what his game plans are. I have an idea.
And to be fair, neither you nor I, nor likely any of our listeners are qualified to criticize his game plans.
Right. But I'm here to tell you, I don't think that there's a coach in America that can take the roster that we have and make it into a 25-win team right now.
I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and we were talking about how Murray State struggles to attack a zone. Mm-hmm. And my friend said, I wonder if Coach knows how to attack a zone. And I said, wait a minute. Just wait just a minute. And he said, I saw this video and it was showing how to attack zones. And I said, you don't think he's seen that video or videos like it? I absolutely guarantee you that he knows how to attack the zone. And one thing that people don't realize is just because the players are doing it one way, that doesn't mean they're doing it the way the coach told them to do it.
Absolutely.
And
you've got, my big thing is, I think that there's talent on this roster. I don't think that it's developed to the point where it needs to be for us to be a championship caliber team.
Now here, however, is the depressing thing, okay? The Racers lose at the end of the year Bryce Jones, mm-hmm. DeMarcus Croker, G. McGee. Mm-hmm. So
that's how that works. I mean,
if you look to next year, I don't see any reason to believe they'll be better next year than they are now. Now, people say, well, the backups will get better, but they've made no impact this year, and the backups from last year didn't get better. And then people say, well, this is an all-world recruiting class. But Bryce Jones was a junior college All-American. Mm-hmm. He was going to be awesome. Mm-hmm. DeMarcus Croker was a 4-star recruit coming
absolutely
out of high school. He went to Texas. Everybody told me he was going to be the second coming.
Yeah.
G. McGee, he came from Chattanooga. And at the time that Murray State took him, I pointed out, he doesn't really shoot it very well. But everybody told me that would change once he got here, and you couldn't pay any attention to that, and he was going to be a great player. I don't put any stock whatsoever in the evaluations that people give of recruiting classes, because they're always all world before they get here, and very few of them turn out to be all world by the time they leave. And that's no knock on the kids, because very few recruits are truly all world. It just shows how difficult it is to tell what they're going to be like.
Well, it's definitely as much an art as it is a science. And I think if you look at this roster, there are blocks in place from these guys that could develop. Now, will they develop? I don't know. Some of that's going to be on coaching. Agreed. Some of that's on the coaching staff. Some of that's going to be on how they develop the guys over a summer. But some of that's on the player as well. You look at some of these guys and you recruit on talent. You try to recruit the guys that are going to fit the right system. But you got to think it's not an exact science. It's just not. Otherwise, Cameron Payne doesn't end up at Murray State University.
Or Isaiah Cannon.
Or probably Ed Daniel, to be really honest with you. But you look at those guys, and they come here because we see something, the coaching staff sees something that, okay, yeah, I think I can develop that. And for every one of those guys, there's another guy that you take and you go, I think I can develop that. And it doesn't work out.
One thing about an Isaiah Cannon, Isaiah came in believing he was going to be the best player on the team. I remember his freshman year, I was talking to him, and I asked him, who's faster, you or Isaac Miles? And Isaiah said, I am, and he knows it.
You got to love that swagger. And the best part is, now, here's where it gets really interesting. Because a lot of these guys have swagger. But does it last through the first few practices where you're going up against guys, you might be a 17, 18-year-old kid going up against 22, 23-year-old men who have 3 and 4 years of D1 experience, and they're pretty good at the game too. What really sets Isaiah Cannon apart was his ability to go in against B.J. Jenkins and Isaac Miles, who, let's face it, 2 fantastic guards in Murray State history. I mean, they played the game completely differently from each other, but they were both extremely productive and were very good basketball players. He comes in and plays, and you know they didn't give him anything. You know that that's just not how they played. This is a kid who went through the fire and actually kept his swagger about him, learned and progressed, and ended up being one of the greatest Racer players of all time.
Now, Murray State plays at home on Saturday against longtime arch rival Austin Peay, and it's a game the Racers need to win. Now, I looked at the Massey ratings before today's show. Murray State is projected to win 4 of their last 5 games. If they do that, they will wind up with a winning record.
Yep.
The game against Austin Peay is a game that they are projected to win.
Right.
They can't let this one slip away. They have to bounce back, come out strong, and come away with the victory.
What really impressed me last night, the Racers went into the game not as favorites in Morehead State. Let's just call that what it is. They went on the road on a long road trip by bus. Having driven it, it's terrible. You go in between the mountains over in Morehead, and that's a tough place to play. I don't care if there's 8 people in the stands, which that's about what they had. Although they reported 4,100. Let's not talk about that too much yet. They went in there and they gave a team with the best interior presence in the league. I really stand by that. I think there are better players, but for teams and post players, Morehead's pretty dang good. They got some guys who get down in the blocks, and they are really tough. They just do.
What do you think about Saturday in Austin Peay?
I look at that game, Murray goes to Clarksville. They lose a game in overtime. I think they'll win it. But I'll tell you this much, you'll know how close to right I am in the first 5 minutes, 10 minutes of the first half. Because
what do you think they have to do to beat Peay?
Stay the hell out of foul trouble. Stay out of foul trouble. Stay out of foul trouble. Stay out of foul trouble. That's it. If they can stay out of foul trouble and keep the guys on the floor that need to be on the floor, I think they win the game.
Okay. Moving along, Callaway County basketball. The Lakers and Lady Lakers played at Carlisle County earlier this week.
What a fun year for both those teams. They really impressed me this year.
They have played pretty darn well this year. And, Carlisle County put up a stiff fight in both of those games.
Which you expect.
Callaway boys have now won 6 or 7 games in a row. They're on a roll. They beat a very good Mayfield team like a week ago. So they've been playing better and better and better. They get a huge game against Marshall County tomorrow night. Now, let me explain this here. Callaway and Marshall have both beaten Murray, okay?
Yeah.
The winner of tomorrow's game wins the regular season district title.
Yep.
And they are the top seed in the district tournament, and since there are only 3 teams in the district, the winner tomorrow night will be in the regional tournament no matter what happens in the district tournament. This is a huge game.
This is a postseason game, is what it is.
There are people who think Marshall County is the best boys basketball team in the first region. They're certainly one of the best teams in the region. Callaway held them to 36 points the first time they played. Now, the Lakers only managed to score 25. It was a defensive struggle on both sides, but the Lakers have shown that they can contain Marshall County. They can keep Marshall County from putting up big points. So Callaway has shown that they can do what it takes on the defensive side of the ball to come away with a victory. They need to find a way to score against Marshall County.
Absolutely.
I'm betting that Terry Birdsong's been working on that and will have them ready.
I tend to agree, and I think Coach Birdsong has done a really great job with this team. You look at the roster, and it is how he's called it. You got a bunch of guys who are really good at one thing. And it's a different thing for each guy. There's a rebounder on the team. There's a scorer on the team. There's a defensive player on the team. There's a passer on the team. You look at it and you go, okay, that's great. Somebody's got to develop that second thing for this team to take the next step. And you see flashes, just brief flashes of the potential of these players. And I want to give Coach Birdsong a lot of credit in developing that. I think this team has a chance to win it. I mean, this is a postseason game. I don't care how you slice it. This is a postseason game. You win this game, and you're in the regional tournament. To me, that says it's a district championship.
And you're in the regional tournament as a district winner.
You can't ask for anything better than that. I mean,
So-
then all of a sudden, that next game you play in the actual district championship game,
Right.
that's a seeding place.
Right.
Oh, yeah, we're
Yeah.
playing a seeding place. That's
I
all right.
actually misspoke. Winning this game does not make Callaway a district winner. That'll depend on the district tournament.
Right.
But-
They're the one seed
Right.
if they go in. And the one seed gets a bye into the district championship game.
Right.
Since the last two teams in the district make it to the regionals, that's a straight shot into the regionals.
Absolutely.
At least you're going in as a number two into the region.
One quick note before moving along to the Lady Lakers. That Carlisle County boys team, they were a very unusual team because 2/3 to 3/4 of their shots were threes. And they took several that they made from the volleyball line.
Absolutely.
And you don't expect that. These were kids taking NBA range three-pointers. Now, they were small.
Yeah.
One of the smallest high school teams that I've seen in quite a while, and usually Carlisle County has some big boys.
Yeah.
They don't have any big boys right now. These kids were all small, but they spread the floor. They played five-out motion a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And as soon as they got an open look at a three, even if it was 25 to 30 feet, they were jacking it, and that was fun to watch.
Well, and what that tells you is that wasn't a lot of those cases when you see a team start shooting from that distance, you go, oh, that's young players making mistakes. That's not what this team is. They were doing it because that's their offense.
And that's their offense because they have no size.
That's it. How do you do it? If you've got small guards, let alone small posts, but if you've got small guards, how do you keep them from getting their shots rejected? Well, you take a step further back. Make them guard you out even further. And a lot of teams don't know how to do that. Once you get outside the three-point line, there are some teams, especially at the high school level, who don't know how to extend that defense without getting themselves caught in a bad position.
Now, the Callaway girls played the Carlisle County girls the other night, and Carlisle gave them fits. Callaway was a 15-point favorite. They wound up winning the game by about 9 or 10 points.
Right.
But Carlisle came out, and they had some talented kids. Nobody with just outrageous athletic ability, but they had talented kids, and the thing that they did that made them effective was that they didn't waste any time on offense. They would bring the ball down the floor. They didn't pass it 6-8 times.
Right.
They would attack immediately. One pass, two at most, and then somebody's attacking. And they got a lot of wide open shots as a result of that. Now, they drove it to the rim a lot, but if they were open at 12 feet, they were going to take that shot. And I that was very effective for them. And I think in high school girls basketball, that is an effective approach.
Yeah, I agree. Well, here's the thing to think of. If you're a fan of the Lakers like we are, That's the kind of team that you'll find in the regional tournament. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the
Carlisle
River
will
County
be
team is.
there.
They're going to be there. I mean, you look at their district. The district isn't the strongest of districts, but they're a good team. They've got a plan and they execute it. Now, will they beat a lot of teams in the regional tournament? Maybe not. But if you're like the Lakers and shooting for that number 2 out of the district to get to the regional tournament and be in the regional tournament, you're going to be paired up with a 1 from another district. And it might be a team like Carlisle County.
Actually, I must be getting old, or it may be that I've been asleep since then, because the margin wasn't as big as what I said at the end of that. It turned out to be a closer game, because now I actually remember that Keeley Puckett went to the free throw line for Callaway, having to hit 2 free throws to give them a 2-point lead. And if Keeley doesn't make those free throws, the Lady Lakers aren't going to win the game. Keeley made the free throws. It's the 3rd time this year she's hit 2 free throws in situations like that to seal victories. Really proud of Keeley in the way that she played.
Clutch.
Absolutely. The Lady Lakers play at Marshall County tomorrow night. That is a huge game for them. Let's just be honest. Murray's going to win the district tournament. They're going to win the regional tournament. Nobody's going to beat them. They're that much better than everybody else is. But Callaway can beat Marshall County. They were only down 2 at halftime the last time they played Marshall County. They've got to come out. They've got to handle Marshall County's pressure, and they have to keep Maya Davis from hitting threes.
Yeah.
Hannah Lange, as good as everybody says she is, as much publicity as she gets, she's not going to beat them. But Maya Davis can beat them.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. And that's a pretty astute observation, because Lange does get a lot of the publicity, and rightly so. She's a talented player. But as it comes to how that team works, Davis is absolutely is the straw that stirs the drink. I mean, that's just how it is. So we look at it, we try to understand just what it is that you want to see them do. And you're right, this is a huge game for the Lady Lakers, and I think they can win it, but they've got to come together and play the right way from the opening tip. You cannot allow Marshall County to have their way for a quarter. You can't allow them to jump out to a lead, because closing is so much more difficult at the high school level.
I do want to mention last Friday night was a great night.
Absolutely
We retired Avery Fields' jersey. I got to see Avery and talk to her and interview her on the radio. And a bunch of the girls came back from Avery's time.
Yeah.
And I got to see a lot of them. And for me and my wife, they're like adopted granddaughters.
Yeah.
Darian Manus, Carly Wilson, Emily Chrisman, and there were so many others, and here I am sitting here. I'm afraid I'm going to leave people out. But
suffice it to say that every single girl on the roster, you guys have a personal friendship and connection with, and I can vouch for that. I've seen how they light up when they talk about you or to you, or even when they see your wife around and they say hi. I think that's a really great thing.
And my wife loves that. I mean, she takes pictures. And one night at a football game, a bunch of the girls basketball players were in the stands behind her, and they started chanting her name, Marilyn Aubrey, and she loved it. So anyway, it was good getting to see all of the Lady Lakers that came back for
tip my cap
honoring Avery.
To McCracken County head coach Scott Civils for coming in.
Abby Futrell. Let me mention Abby. She came back too. And yes, Coach Civils came.
In his red blazer, which, as anybody who was a fan of the Lakers while he was here knows, that he loved that red blazer. That was
everybody should know Scott. He did a great job when he was here.
Did, yeah.
And he's a great guy, a great friend of mine. And Scott never would have left if it hadn't just been a situation for his family that he couldn't afford to pass up.
No, and I'll say this about the man. I've known him since I was in high school, and you will not find a better person. I mean, you can talk about coaching, you can talk about, basketball IQ, you can talk a lot of things that you can talk about with Scott Civils. But I've never had a better person in basketball. He is a top-notch guy, and a guy that I'm happy to know.
And Are we done?
I think we're done.
That brings to a close this edition of the Improbability Engine.